Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts about the 40K universe. I am your host, Gersh1, and you are watching One Mind Syndicate. Today we continue talking about the warsmith Honsou as we get into part 2. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K content every single day. And if you have not checked out part 1, click on the link in the description below. That's going to take you to part 1. We left Honsou with his army pretty depleted. He came out victorious, but he doesn't have an army anymore. And as the thumbnail goes to show, he has to battle other Chaos Lords or Chaos Champions, so we're going to get to see that. Let's get into 40 facts on Honsou. Though Honsou had emerged as the victor in the brutal civil war between the Iron Warrior warsmiths, the victory came at a terrible cost. Most of his forces had been smashed by the two rival warsmiths and their armies during the war. Despite the losses to his troops and the destruction of the demon Kulaba, Honsou began the task of rebuilding his forces. He accomplished this by inviting those surviving renegade space marines, led by Aldrich Vanes, a former battle brother of the Raven Guard, into his growing army. His personal retinue also changed to include Kadaris Grendel, a particularly murderous Iron Warrior who had previously served under Berosus, and the loathsome but powerful warp creature known as the Newborn, who was genetically cloned from the genetic material of Uriel Ventris by the demon Kulaba before their destruction. The recent destruction of his fortress on Mendringard made the warsmith seethe with rage at the bitter defeat by the hands of Uriel Ventris. Honsou plotted his vengeance against the upstart Ultramarines captain and his chapter. Honsou knew he would not be satisfied until he had inflicted humiliation on the one enemy who had escaped him. Honsou attacked the defense platform Ultra 9, an Imperial space station that orbited above Taurus Ultra, the site of Captain Ventris' stunning victory over the Tyranids a few short years before. Honsou's warband slaughtered everyone aboard the station and seized control of its deadly missile payload. A salvo of 16 orbital torpedoes surged from the station's launch bay, followed by another rippling salvo seconds later. Another 3 salvos launched until all but one of the platform's entire payload of missiles was expended. Each missile dropped away rapidly from the platform in a ballistic trajectory toward the planet's surface. As the missiles reached a predetermined altitude over the planet's surface, each one exploded and spread its viral payload into the air. Vast quantities of the experimental Heraclitus viral strain was released into the atmosphere. All across the planet, a terrible rain fell, wreaking terrible damage as the insidious microbes went to work on Taurus Ultra's indigenous and Xenos vegetation. The world of Taurus Ultra had suffered the horror of invasion by the monstrous swarms of the Tyranids. Though the invasion had been defeated, the dreadful legacy of the alien invaders remained to taint the planet's ecology forever. From pole to pole, horrific spires of dreadful alien vegetation towered over the landscape, slowly choking the life from the natural landscape. The alien flora had subsumed entire continents, the vicious instinct to devour encoded in every strand of its genetic structure. Nutrients were leached from the soil and used to create hyperfertile spore growth that drifted on the heat currents of the air to seed new regions and pollute more land. The Heraclitus virus had been developed from a partial fragment of ancient research conducted by the Mechanicus Magos Heraclitus. The biotoxins were intended to increase the growth rate of crops on agri-worlds, and were designed to increase the productivity of such worlds 1,000-fold. Within seconds of the Heraclitus strain's release into the atmosphere, the alien growths reacted to its touch, surging upward and over the planet's terrain. Overwhelmed by mutant growths, poisonous plant life expanded whole kilometers in seconds, as the virulent growth strain sent its metabolism into overdrive. Huge amounts of nutrients were sucked from the ground and released as enormous quantities of heat, raising the ambient temperature of the world in a matter of moments. Oxygen was sucked greedily from the atmosphere by horrifyingly massive spore chimneys, and the planet's protective atmospheric layers were gradually stripped in an unthinking biological genocide. This was not the rapid death of exterminatus, but ecological death of global proportions. Panicked messages were hurled out into the immaterium, and only those with the money, influence, or cunning escaped on hastily prepared starships that fled the planet's destruction. In the wake of the attack, billions had been left behind, and weeks later, as the last of the planet's atmosphere was stripped from it by the hyper-evolved alien biology, hard stellar radiation swept the surface, killing every living thing and laying waste to all that remained. Months after the launch of the Heraclitus missiles, nothing remained alive. The deadly alien vegetation killed by lethal levels of radiation, and the frigid cold that gripped the planet without its protective atmosphere. All that now remained of the planet was a dead, lifeless ball of rock, its surface seared and barren, with only the skeletal remains of its blackened cities left as evidence that human beings had once lived upon it. After the death of the planet, Magos Locard of the Adeptus Mechanicus and members of the Scutari landed upon the dead planet, attempting to investigate what occurred. Following a lone beacon, the Explorator team found a lone, battered orbital torpedo. Removing the payload bay of the torpedo, the Magos reached inside and removed its contents. A cracked helmet, the paint chipped, and one eye lens missing. The helmet was a deep blue and bore the badge of the Ultramarines chapter of the Adeptus Astartes. The helmet was meant to send a message to Uriel Ventris that you do not walk away from a fight with the warsmith Honsou without paying a price. In order to rebuild his forces, Honsou traveled to the Badab sector, the site of the infamous Badab War, to the heart of the warp rift called the Maelstrom. Within the heart of its hellish realm lay New Badab, the world of Huron Blackheart, the infamous tyrant of Badab, and now the leader of the Red Corsairs. Honsou attended the Skull Harvest, a contest hosted by Blackheart between Chaos Warbands, where Chaos champions vied with one another for supreme dominance, until only one victor emerged. The reigning champion then took total control of the losing champion's warbands. The Skull Harvest took place within the Arena of Thorns, the large venue that hosted the murderous contest. The decapitated heads of the fallen were mounted and displayed upon spikes. Blood would be spilled, the weak would die, and the victor would benefit greatly from the tyrant of Badab's patronage. Honsou was determined to win the murderous contest at any cost, for he possessed a grand vision of revenge. With the victories the warsmith and his champions had won over the following days, Honsou's forces had grown exponentially in size, numbering somewhere in the region of 5,000 soldiers. Scores of armored units and fighting machines, as well as all manner of Xenos and Corsair troops, were now under his command. The swords of 17 warbands now belonged to Honsou, and by any measure of reckoning, he had a fearsome force with which to wreak havoc on his enemies. But the Skull Harvest was not yet over, and the tyrant's rule decreed that there could only be one champion left standing at its end. As the fourth day of killing drew to an end, only the armies of 3 champions remained. There were the forces of the Blood God Korn's champion, Uluvent, and his 6,000 blood-hungry Skulltakers, the Pleasure God Slaanesha's champion, Notha Edeshe, and his procured warband of 5,000 fighters, and Honsou's warband of Iron Warriors. On the final day of the Skull Harvest, the 3 warriors stepped into the arena, clad in their armor and each armed with their weapon of choice. This stage of the battle would be where each warrior sought to gauge the measure of the other, searching for signs of weakness or fear to be exploited. Honsou knew he would find neither in these 2 opponents, warriors hardened by decades of war and devotion to their gods. Honsou cared nothing for the thrill of the fight, nor the honor of the kill. The entire endeavor was a means to a single end. The Slaaneshi champion was quickly bested, and Honsou then faced the berserker Uluvent. In the ensuing battle, Honsou managed to destroy the Coronet champion's weapon, forcing him to grapple with his opponent in bloody close quarters. The sheer ferocity of Uluvent's attack nearly overwhelmed Honsou, who only just managed to free his necrodermis arm and used it to grip open a jagged wound in Uluvent's neck. Weaponless and bleeding out quickly, the Coronet champion called for another weapon to finish the duel between himself and the warsmith. As he reached for the sword from his ally, the apparent turncoat, Grendel, reversed his grip and rammed the blade into the Coronet champion's chest. The tip of the weapon ripped through the back of Uluvent's armor, and the mighty warrior staggered as Grendel twisted the blade deeper into his chest. Honsou gave him no chance to recover from his shock and pain, and brought his axe down upon the Coronet warrior's shoulders, the dark blade smashing the warrior's shoulder guard to splinters and cleaving the champion of the blood god from collarbone to pelvis. Hanzo then honored the former champion's last request and took his skull off his neck with a sweep of the axe. Hanzo emerged as the sole victor of the Skull Harvest. At the final tally, Hanzo left New Badab with close to 17,000 chaotic warriors sworn to blood in his cause. Uluvent's warriors and the others that he had won were now Hanzo's, their banners now bearing the Iron Skull badge of the Iron Warriors. The Slaneshi champion, Notha Edese, survived the final battle and then willingly swore allegiance to Hanzo. As the Warsmith starship broke orbit over New Badab, numerous other vessels now accompanied it, gifts from the Tyrant of Badab to be used for the express purpose of dealing death to the hated forces of the Corpse Emperor. In addition, a ragtag, yet powerful fleet of corsairs and renegades also formed up around Hanzo's flagship. The Warsmith's fleet departed the Tyrant's domain and set course for the eastern fringe in the realm of Ultramar. And those were 40 facts on the Warsmith Hanzo. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And that ends, or that concludes, his whole story. I hope you guys enjoyed. I did read the comments last video, and you guys said that you guys, or more of you guys, prefer longer videos than shorter videos, and I understand. So we're going to try our best to get that done. Don't forget that we have a giveaway going on right now. If you check out our daily life of an Imperial Guard veteran, you can win some Scions. So definitely jump on over there to comment and increase your chances of winning. Thanks for everything, guys, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. This was Gersh1 with One Mind Syndicate signing out.